Shalom, Kahala Yahawah, Bashem Yashai, Bashem Qadash. Double honors to my teachers, the apostles and elders of Great Millstone. Peace and mercy to the elect, who the house of David reborn again in this generation. And Shalom to the 130 Yasharallah, who today are known as the Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, who before losing our true heritage, we were known as, and still are, the true Hebrew Israelites of the Holy Bible. In today's lesson, I'm going to do something a little different today, and we're going to basically watch this video, not all of it, but most of it, and I'm going to basically break in with some scripture and break down what is being said through the scriptures, okay? Because one thing is in this video here from Kim Iverson, and if you're not sure who Kim Iverson is, she's a pretty good journalist. Okay, she used to be on The Hill, and she left there just because it basically was a liberal cesspool, and she went on to go on and make her own news channel. And for the most part, she's very good and unbiased. But one thing about her is, though she looks Asian, she really is an Edomite, at least I believe, right? Because this is her dad, and her mom is an Ammonite, right? So-called Japanese, I believe, or Thailand. But the point being is that she's an Edomite, okay? At least that's how she comes off as when you watch this video. Not because she's out there speaking against the Palestinians, but she just has clear unbelief in the Bible. Now, one thing about this is that she's going to basically make it very clear that these people here, these Amalekites, Amalekite being the biblical name for the Israeli people, right? Amalek is the top tribe of the nation of Edom, which means these people here, they are the biblical Edomites, okay? They are the top tribe of Edom, right? Or Esau, they come from Esau, okay? So all these people here on this screen are Edomites. Now that being said, she makes it very clear that these people are not the biblical Jews, okay? But she does it in a tongue-in-cheek manner, okay? She explains how they come from the Khazarian conversion, and she doesn't really understand the Bible that well, right? When you're gonna hear her right now, you're gonna see how she pretty much mentions biblical issues as if she read the Cliff Notes version of the Bible and the subject matter. That being said, she's bringing out a lot of truth, and these devils here, they're being revealed. And not only this, but like I said again, if this lady is an Edomite, that fulfills another prophecy, which is Psalm 64:8. So they shall make their own tongue to fall upon themselves. All that see them shall flee away. Because you see, these Edomites, which is again the biblical name for the Caucasian race on the earth, they were given the world, right? Job 9:24, the earth is given into the hand of the wicked. These are the wicked that the Bible is speaking about. These are the people who have been given the stewardship of the earth, and the current reality we're living in, with its dystopian narrative and its constant wars, corruption, crime, and just eternal decay, is a result of these people ruling the world. Now, let's go and watch this video. But actually, before we get into this, let's read this one scripture that explains what's going on in this video. This is Jeremiah 49:10. But I have made Esau bare, I have uncovered his secret places, and he shall not be able to hide himself. His seed is spoiled, and his brethren, and his neighbors, and he is not. So you see these Edomites, man, they're riding high on the hog, okay? And they're living their best life right now. But they are fighting within themselves, right? The Egyptians are fighting the Egyptians, as the scripture says. And not only that, but as the prophecy that I just read in Jeremiah says, that they're not going to be able to hide themselves. When you read these comments, it is very plain, right? There's over 6,000 comments, and they're all pretty much like this, right? Nobody's denying Jewish presence in Palestine. However, these settlers are not those ancient people. No wonder the DNA test is illegal in Israel. He forgot to mention, let me see, actually that's nothing. Here you go. Funny how Jews left Israel brown and returned white. Let's see, and it goes on and on. Here it goes. Yeah, just like the Egyptian president stated back in the 1950s UN meeting, Jews left Israel black and came back white. Rabbi Yaakov Shapiro, there is nothing Jewish about the Jewish state. Most Zionists don't believe in God, don't believe that God exists, but they do believe that he promised them Palestine, right? And it goes on, right? This is, they tell you, man, the Jews today are not the Jews was talked about in the Bible. And it goes on. And you could see, like, again, you could go and watch this video if you like. Okay, you could see, I thought this was fucking hilarious. Never ask a woman her age, never ask a man his income, and most of all, never ever ask an Israeli where their grandparents came from. See, these people, man, they know what's up. They know that these Israeli are not the Israelites, okay? They know that these are not the chosen people. But one thing that they haven't caught on to yet, well, at least not all of them, is that these are the Edomites, okay? That these are the biblical wicked that the Bible speaks of, okay? But the thing is that this is starting to come out, because this is just one of many videos and movements that the Lord is rising up in the world, okay? If you look right now, what's going on in the universities, Columbia, Yale, you see a lot of people rising up and protesting against these small hatters, right? And why is that? Well, let's here, actually, let me read this. This is Obadiah 1 and 2. Behold, I have made thee small amongst the heathen. Thou art greatly despised. These Amalekites, they are getting the most hatred they have ever received right now, okay? And it's very plain. This is why they're trying to enact all these anti-Sem laws and these hate speech laws, and they're trying to make it illegal to talk against these people or to divest in Israel, right? They're trying all of these ways to coerce people to interact with them. But why? Because they are greatly despised. Now, let's go and get on to this video, and let's go ahead and just see what is being revealed here.
All of this comes down to the claim that this is the Jewish homeland and that they have every right to be there, that they're the indigenous people, and that the people who are there are these Arabs who've come from other places and that they shouldn't be there. So I want to play this for you. This is Naftali Bennett. He has been the opposition of Netanyahu. He's many think would be the next prime minister, and yet these are the types of things he believes. He has this 3-minute, he says this is a 3-minute, 3 minutes of the history of Jews and Zionism. Let's go watch what he has to say, and then we're going to break it down.
I'll do something. I'll try in 3 minutes to do the history of Jews and Zionism, starting now. The Jewish people first entered the land of Israel 3,300 years ago.
And real quick, before I let this rat continue, this devil, this Edomite devil, he's going to talk about the Israeli, and first of all, he's going to get them wrong. He's going to get this history wrong. And that's because this is not his history. He is not those people, okay? He goes back to the line of Edom, okay? His people were the adversaries of the Israelites, okay? And they today have stolen the identity of us Israelites and are using it as a cloak of maliciousness to perform their New World Order and their conquering of the world, okay? Now, by the way, this guy isn't even Israeli. He's a American. I think that he's like Polish, and he went to America, right? So he's an American Polish Jewish guy, right? Ultimately, he's an Edomite. But this is just shows you, man, that the land of Israel over there today, they're not even or all the presidents that have come into the land of Israel, right, in modern day Israelis, they're not even from the land, right? This is all just a global movement to steal the Holy Land again, which is another biblical prophecy that would come to pass through the hands of the Edomites, which we'll get to in just a bit.
Everyone can read that in the Bible. Assuming you don't believe the Bible, then you can look at archaeology, which shows evidence of about 3,000 years ago. There's no dispute that...
Hold on a second, I want to pause this. Let me just go ahead and do a pause. So let's back this up just for a second. So he says, let's go ahead and play this.
Then you can look at archaeology. Jewish people first entered...
there it is. The Jewish people first entered. So he's saying the Jewish people first entered.
Jewish people first entered the land of Israel 3,300 years.
Okay, so they came from somewhere else, right? So he's going to tell us this is why the Jewish people belong here. This is why these other people don't belong here. And he's saying, first of all, the people were here. They came to the land 3,300 years ago. And if you don't believe the Bible, then you can believe archaeology. They came to the land 3,000 years ago. So there were people already there. This wasn't, in the Bible, it even says this wasn't like desolate, just empty land. There were people that were there, the Canaanites, and that Abraham showed up with his family. So where does scholars say Abraham came from? Well, scholars say that, says the Bible states that Abraham was raised in Ur of the Chaldeans. Most scholars agree that that area was the Sumerian city of, anyway, they say it's about the city where Abraham comes from is about 200 miles southeast of Baghdad. I can't pronounce all the names. But 200 miles southeast of Baghdad in lower Mesopotamia in what is now modern day Iraq. So he comes from Iraq. That's where Abraham comes from. That's where the Jewish people come from.
So let me break in on here, because again, this is what I meant by what I said. This lady's just simply taking cliff notes of what is actually going on, so she gets a lot of things wrong. And this is one of the things that I want to... She doesn't get this completely wrong, but she's trying to imply, because us Israelites, right, our forefather Abraham came out of the land of Ur of the Chaldeans, right, which is basically modern day Iraq, that that land isn't the property of the Israelites, okay? But that's wrong. And why is that? Well, because the Bible makes it very clear whose that land is, even if there were people in there, okay? And let's go and get that real quick. And that we could find here in Ezekiel. I got the NIV version because it makes it very clear, but it says, and you got to deduce the understanding from here, which we're going to break down, but it says, Ezekiel 36:5. This is what the sovereign Lord says. In my burning zeal, I have spoken against the rest of the nations and against all Edom. Okay, these are the Edomites, right? The Caucasian race, including those Israelis. For with glee and with malice in their hearts, they made my land. Whose land? The Lord's land. Okay, that land does not belong to the Canaanites, does not belong to the Philistines, does not belong to the Arabs, does not belong to the Israelis or the English. It belongs to the Lord, and the Lord has given it to who? The Israelites. With all in their hearts they made my land their own possession, so that they might plunder its pasture lands. Okay, so there you go, man. So that is what the truth of the matter of what that land is. So her implying that because the Jewish people, right, the Israelites, come from the land of Iraq, right, that the land of Israel is not theirs. But again, what this unbeliever doesn't understand is that land doesn't belong to the Canaanites that rested there, that settled there. No, those Hamites that were in that land should have kept going south down into Africa, which belonged to Ham and his descendants. But they stuck around in the land of Israel, land of Canaan, as it was called back then, and they basically pitched their tents. And what did the Lord say? He said, basically told Joshua to get rid of them, okay, because it was time to evict the squatters.
Because it was Abraham's children. He had 13 children, 12 of them boys.
Wrong. Abraham did not have 13 children.
Come from. Because it was Abraham's children. He had 13 children, 12 of them boys, one of them a girl. So there was the 12 tribes of Israel. And those are...
She even said it herself, and she didn't understand this. This is how you know she simply is just reading cliff notes about this. And again, this is why it's very important, Akim, that we understand this truth so that we would call out misinformation like this. Because let's go ahead and go into the Bible family tree. Okay, this is the Bible family tree. When you go down, right, Shem. Okay, Shem had 5 sons. The lineage goes from Arphaxad, Selah, Eber, which is where Hebrew comes from. It goes down to Peleg, Ru, Savg, Nahor, all the way down to Terah, and Abraham, right? Abram, which was his original name. Then his name was changed to Abraham. Well, Abraham did not have 13 children. Abraham had 2 children, right? The first child was Ishmael, okay? But Ishmael came from a servant woman, Hagar, okay? She was given to Abram as a gift from the Egyptian Pharaoh, okay? As like a peace offering. And well, Hagar, she gave Abram his first son, Ishmael. Now Ishmael are where the Arabs and the Palestinians come from, okay? Now there are some Palestinians who are Israelites, and that's because the Israelites mixed in with the Palestinians. But these are what you would refer to as the so-called black Palestinians, okay? I forgot what they call them, but those are likely going to be the real Israelites. Now, the rest of the Palestinians there, the ones that go back to Ishmael, they're in the wrong place at the wrong time. They do not belong to that land. So again, back to Abraham, right? So Abraham didn't have 13 kids. Well, at least not, off the bat, right? Because after having Ishmael, he had Isaac, okay? And then after Sarai passed away, he got with Keturah, and Keturah gave him multiple children, okay? But when she says 13 sons, what she's actually talking about are not Isaac's sons, because again, Isaac only had 2 sons, Jacob and Esau, okay? What she's talking about is Jacob. Jacob had 12 sons, okay? He had the 12 sons, and one of his sons, Joseph, had 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, and they took the place of their father and their uncle Dan, okay? Their uncle Dan. Now Dan, the tribe of Dan, was amalgamated into the other tribes, okay? They no longer are considered a tribe, at least by the end of the New Testament. So that lady talking about there's 13 tribes, she's wrong, okay? There's no such thing as a 13th tribe, right? The tribe of Dan was amalgamated into the other tribes, okay? Which means that after everything is said and done, there's only 12 tribes of Israel.
This is the Jewish people. Some of that is the Jewish people. So they didn't even come from there, but he's admitting that, but he's saying, but let's keep watching.
And everyone can read that in the Bible. Assuming you don't believe the Bible, then you can look at archaeology, which shows evidence of about 3,000 years ago. There's no dispute that the Jewish people founded their first commonwealth, the kingdom of David, 3,000 years ago. It was destroyed. We were kicked out. We came back, founded the second Commonwealth of Israel, which went on for several hundred years, and again it was destroyed, this time by the Romans. Jews stayed in Israel, but few Jews stayed in Israel. The rest of the Jews were kicked out to all across the world.
This is incorrect. No Jews stayed in the land of Israel, okay, after the 70 AD destruction. See, these devils here like to try to say that because they pretend that they could all trace their lineage back to King David or back to being in that land, which is a total farce. Because again, the Bible says that the true Israelites would lose their heritage, as it says in Jeremiah 17:4. Now, these people here, they don't know that, right? So this is why they don't try to make up for those lies and try to explain how they came back to their lost heritage. No, they claim to be the Israelites all the way back to King David. So again, that's how you know they're liars. Well, one of the many ways you know they're liars. Because again, in 70 AD, when the Romans destroyed Jerusalem, they destroyed the temple, and in the temple were all the birth records, all the records, right? All the writings and all these things that could have traced the heritage of the Israelites back to that land were all basically destroyed. Now, some of them did escape, and they went with the Israelites that fled down into Africa, and all open to Europe and whatnot. But for the most part, those records were lost, right? If not immediately, eventually over time. Now, another thing too, the Romans, when they destroyed Jerusalem in 70 AD, for 200 years, meaning until about 270 to 300 AD, they did not permit any Israelites, right, any Jews to go back into that land, okay? And why not? Well, because they were trying to erase the Israelites from off the face of the earth. They wanted to be done with the Jews. Okay, so this guy is totally talking shit.
And every day they prayed 3 times a day that they want to return to it.
Where is that in the Bible? Where is this in the Bible? That they prayed 3 times a day to return to Israel.
And
nowhere, because by that time Israel was scattered and we were dispersed amongst the world. Again, this is biblical prophecy that we will be scattered around the world.
it was
Okay, so let's pause right there for just a second. So he says the Jews stayed in Israel, so a few Jews stayed in Israel. The rest of the Jews were kicked out all across the world. Okay, where did the Jews go? So the 10 lost tribes. So there were the 12 tribes of Israel were actually 13 tribes, because one of the tribes.
Wrong. This is what I was going back to say, right? That they weren't 13 tribes, it was 12 tribes.
Tribes was actually split into 2, Ephraim and Manasseh. So there's this is excruciating to hear this woman try to explain the biblical narrative. The Israelites that were split into 2 were the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, or as the Lord refers to them, Ephraim and Judah, or Israel for the northern kingdom and Judah for the southern kingdom. Okay, 13 tribes effectively. Most of them were lost. There were a couple of them that remained. We know the history of those people and they were the Jewish people that stuck around, that were there. We know that those people were there. The 10 lost tribes, however, let me just read this to you. The king of Assyria captured Samaria, and he carried them away to Assyria and placed them in Halal and on the harbor, the river of Gozan, and the cities of Medes. So in the years 722 to 721 BC, the 10 tribes who comprised the northern kingdom of Israel disappeared, conquered by the Assyrian king. They were exiled to Upper Mesopotamia, today modern Syria and Iraq. So they're Arabs. So these are...
Wrong. They are not. The northern kingdom was not Arabs. Okay, this woman, like I said again, it is very obvious she is reading cliff notes about this. Okay, let's get into this. This is where the 10 tribes went. Okay, this is explained in the Apocrypha, right? The middle 14 books that were taken out of the Bible in the 1800s. Because why? Well, because of this very reason. They wanted to hide where the 10 tribes had gone. Okay, it tells you here where we went. This is 2nd Ezra 13 and 40. Those are the 10 tribes which were carried away prisoner out of their own land in the time of Hoshea, the king whom Salmanasar, the king of Assyria, led away captive, and he carried them over the waters, and so came they into another land. This is that Syria land that they basically talking about, right? And it wasn't Medes, it was Medes, the land of the Medes, or the harbor of the Medes, which we were taken to, right? This is why the book of Tobit talks about him being in the land of Ecbatana and around the land of the Medes, because he was over by the land where the modern day Iranians are located. Okay, now what happened? Let's get into the biblical timeline. Well, actually, let's finish reading this and then we'll get into the biblical timeline. 41. But they took this counsel amongst themselves that they would leave the multitude of the heathen and go forth into a further country where never mankind dwelt, that they might there keep their statutes, which they never kept in their own land. And they entered into the Euphrates by the narrow passage places of the river. Again, and this river is talking about the Euphrates River. Okay, 44. For the Most High then showed signs for them and held still the flood till they were passed over. And through that country there was a great way to go, namely of a year and a half. And the same region is called Azareth. Now this is America. The 10 tribes did not stay in that land or go down into Saudi Arabia and become the Arabs. This lady is batshit crazy, and she's just simply naive about the truth of this matter. And this is what happens when you don't understand the Bible. And first of all, she's a non-believer. She's an Edomite. So she's just simply reading notes that her assistant, or maybe even her, that she did the night before, last week, for research for this, show. But the thing is that the northern 10 tribes are not the Arabs. The Arabs descend from Ishmael. Now, on to the biblical timeline. Okay, the biblical timeline, let's go ahead and go to the time when Israel got carried away by Salmanasar, right? Or the king of Assyria. This happened in 722 BC. Okay, and when we were carried away, this ultimately happened because we basically were just wicked. We were wicked, we committed idolatry, and we basically stopped worshiping the Lord, right? We went back on our contract with the Lord, and the Lord had to punish us according to the contract we made in Deuteronomy 28 and 68. Well, after we got carried away, like I said, this is a story where you hear about Tobit in the land of Assyria, and then also in Ecbatana, which is Iran, right? And then later on, if you continue, you have the southern kingdom trying to get right. Nineveh eventually falls, right? And then and when Nineveh falls, it says the Babylonians conquered the Assyrians. So check that out. Who did the Assyrians conquer? They conquered the northern kingdom. Okay, so this happened about 100 years after the Assyrians came and took the 10 tribes. So again, when the Babylonians conquered the Assyrians, it says, and Ephraim is freed from captivity. Some return to Israel, others seek new lands. And how do we know some of the northern kingdom returned back to the land of Israel? Well, in the New Testament, you have multiple Israelites mentioned there belonging to northern kingdom tribes. Okay, well, eventually, like the scripture says, right, we took the counsel amongst ourselves, amongst our elders, and they all decided that we were going to leave the known world, and we were going to go off into a totally distant, far off land, which we would have knowledge of. And why is that? Well, because our previous king, King Solomon, had a navy that would go to the Americas. Okay, they called this the land of Ophir, and you can find that in 1 Kings 10 and 22. For the king, King Solomon, for the king had at sea a navy of Tarshish being Hamites, with the navy of Haran. Once in 3 years, right, that's the key, 3 years came the navy of Tarshish, bringing gold and silver, ivory, and apes and peacocks. Peacocks, when you get into the word, really are turkeys. Okay, but 3 years to go to this land of Ophir and then come back. This is talking about the Americas. Okay, so the 10 tribes didn't become Arabs. They went to the Americas and became so-called Latinos and so-called Native American Indians.
The 10 lost tribes, they weren't lost like they disappeared into nothingness. They were lost in that they lost their identity. They lost their Jewishness. They lost their...
Jewishness is not a proper terminology. Jewish is what these people created to try to come close to the heritage of the Israelites, okay? What she's talking about is, first of all, the point that she's trying to make is totally off. But what she should be saying is that they lost their heritage.
The religion that they believed, they lost their ancestral identity.
And again, it is not a religion. You see, this is where the world gets this really messed up. This is where they get twisted. The Bible is not a book of religion. It is not a book that tells you gotta believe a certain way and you gotta, do these certain rituals and this is a dogma that you gotta believe. No. The Bible is simply a book of laws, statutes, and commandments, history of a particular people, and also the prophecies that would happen to these particular people. Okay, these are the Bible are the ancient records of the Israelites. Okay,
they don't know who they are anymore, meaning they are not Jewish people who identify as Jewish, and we know from these stories.
And that's correct. Because we don't identify as Jewish, we identify as Negro, Latino, and Native Americans.
That they were carried off to Syria and Iraq, meaning that the Arabs who then would come back into the area would be potentially these very people who are...
So when she says the Arabs that would come back into that land, she's... Gosh, man, this lady... And you know what? It really isn't this lady's fault, because really she's a good journalist, right? When you watch her show, it's really good. It's like redacted, but not as edgy, right? But there's so much history that is so easy to get confused, and these devils, these Amalekites and Edomites in power, they purposely make it confusing so that way they could hide themselves in the details. But when she says the Arabs that came back, what she's talking about really is when the Ottoman Empire eventually ended up taking the land of Israel from the Catholics, right, or the Christians. Because again, when you go back a little bit in the timeline, you start finding out about the Crusades, and the Crusades ultimately took place because this is around 1095 to 1291 AD is when the Crusades took place. And this was because the Arabs had taken control for the most part of that land, right? Because why? Well, because you see the Judites, right? The Judeans that had taken over. Jeez, Salaki Yakim, this is how history works, man. It's tied to so many things. But eventually, when the the Judeans take over Rome, right? They eventually start changing things to their own way. They change Rome from being a pagan nation into a one God nation, right? They established the Vatican. They also set up a new land called the Byzantine Empire, which is modern day Turkey. And then eventually they will go on to create the Holy Roman Empire, right? This is where you hear about Charlemagne and stuff, right? Well, the Holy Roman Empire would eventually go on to spawn Germany and the Spanish Empire, France, and I believe England too. But the point being is that while Jake was out here with his other nations that he was building, Rome kind of fell into the hands of so-called barbarians, right? This also included the Arabs that were basically in that land, because again, why? Well, the children of Ishmael were in the land of the Levant, right? Namely, down there in the Arab Peninsula, right below Israel, namely the Nabateans, again, other Ishmaelites who married very heavily into the Edomite nations. Okay, so that being said, the Arabs that came back into that land came back mainly due to the Ottoman Empire's control over that region there in the land of Israel and pretty much all the Levant. Okay, and those were not the Israelites or the 10 tribes like this lady's trying to say. Those were Ishmaelites. Now there definitely were Israelites amongst them, because again, there's going to be Israelites amongst all the people. And when you get back into the north of the sub-Saharan slave trade, which took place about 600 AD, you had a lot of Judites, right, Judeans, that were sold into Roman slave markets and basically sold all over the Arab and Muslim world. Okay, and this is why a lot of the Arabs were Israelites, because again, they were slaves to the Ishmaelites and the Hamites that had taken them.
Actual descendants of Abraham, if you believe all of that, right? So let's keep going with.
If you believe all of that, again, this Edomite does not believe, and why is that? Well, that's because the Lord has hidden Himself from these people.
He has to say, but where are those people? They weren't all around the world. They were carried. You couldn't travel all around the world very easily in that era. You made it just a little ways away, and many of them made it into what would later become Arab land.
Where's your proof for this? Okay, see, this is what she believes, and this is more likely from the reports and that she's getting this from. But the fact is that the Israelites, by and large, specifically the Southern Kingdom, right, the so-called Negroes, they went into Africa, okay, and they mainly settled on the West Coast, but they were also there on the East Coast with Ethiopia and whatnot, but mostly they were on the West Coast. The Northern Kingdom, the 10 tribes that she's speaking about specifically, by and large, they left the Eastern Hemisphere and went to the Western Hemisphere, the other side of the earth, fulfilling biblical prophecy. The Mormons have a whole religion based off of this fact that us Latinos and Native Americans are the Israelites, okay?
It's a pretty lousy 2,000 years, pogroms, Holocaust, but about 150 years ago, secular Jews, primarily Herzl, Jabotinsky, and others, took the...
This Herzl guy, this is the guy that started Zionism. This is a damn devil.
Initiative, let's come back to our own homeland. The Jews are the indigenous...
And by the way, Herzl, trying to build up a movement to create a Jewish homeland, right? He first tried to push this whole idea around the world to give land to these Jewish people. And this is before World War II, okay? They even went down to Uganda to try to find land for these Amalekites to basically dwell in. But what happened is that Herzl he basically was getting the doors closed on him. Nobody wanted to hear him out. But it wasn't until he brought in the religious context, how Israel was their ancient homeland, that it started to get traction. And it was England, right, and their influence over the English monarchy and markets that helped them get into that land to basically steal it.
People of the land of Israel.
No, they're not. He admitted that right up front. Up front, he said the Jewish people first came to the area of Israel 3,300 years ago. That means they're not from there. We know where they're from. According to historians, Abraham, if you believe all of this, is from Iraq. So they're Iraqis.
And again, this smug Edomite, thinking she has a point here. If this argument she's trying to make was to have any validation, then you could simply just say, hey, the Israelites go back to Adam and Eve, and Adam and Eve originally were in the land of Israel, so hence they're just coming back to their land. But that doesn't even need to be said, because why? Well, because of what I had said earlier. The land belongs to the Lord, and the Lord gives it to his people. His people are the Israelites.
Yet they're taking this other piece of land rather than Iraq, but maybe Iraq's next, I don't know. And then he's saying that these are the indigenous people. We know that they're not. He's saying that Herzl, who was an Austrian, took the initiative to go back to the homeland. But what we know is that there were periods of time it's not common now to convert to Judaism, but there were periods of time where there were massive conversion.
And you cannot convert to being an Israelite. Let me just enter that, right? Because she's going to talk about conversion, and she's going to try to make it sound like it's a normal thing. But here is the point. You cannot convert into being an Israelite, okay? It would be as if somebody wanted to convert into being part of your family. Okay, to be part of your family, somebody has to be born into it, right? They have to come from your mother's and father's lineage. If they're your neighbor can't say, oh, I'm going to be part of your family now. I'm going to convert, and I now have your last name. It does not work that way.
To Judaism. For example, the Romans, during the Roman times, there was quite a bit of conversion to Judaism. Take into consideration, 10% of their population was Jewish. Many of them would have converted to Judaism. Compare that to the United States, where the population of
and she's talking about like these Roman, like Herod and all these other devils that try to convert to be part of this. But again, you cannot convert to ethnicity.
Jewish population here is like 4% or something really small. So in the Roman times, and this is actually the second largest hub of Jews outside of Israel is here in the United States. So there was
and that's because the United States is like the main land, it's the headquarters of the nation of Edom.
A lot of Romans who converted, including Roman elites like Queen Helena and Nero, converted to Judaism.
Right, so again, she's talking about Edomites. And the reason why she thinks that she's saying something that gives her a point is because she doesn't understand the true nationality. See, this woman is still thinking in regards to like modern day nationality. She doesn't realize that you can't convert to being an Israelite.
Judaism, Nero. There was also mass conversion within the Roman Empire itself. We also know that there was a lot of other conversions that happened with the Khazars.
And right there, right now, she's going to talk about these devils, right? The Khazarian conversion to Judaism. And again, it wasn't even a conversion. It was simply them creating their own religion based off of the heritage of at that time, lost Israelites. Again, because the Northern Kingdom, by the time that they converted, had already been gone for close to about 1,000 years, right? They had disappeared. And why did they disappear? Well, because they were on the other side of the earth, which nobody outside of the Israelites knew about. Okay, and the Southern Kingdom, they had already been gone for about 600 years down in Africa and dispersed throughout Europe and Asia. Okay, and they weren't calling themselves Israelites. They were now referring to themselves as Moors or different type of names. Okay.
Example, the Khazarian Empire, which takes up modern day Ukraine, parts of Russia, not Czechoslovakia. Let me pull up the map here. The various different, so pretty much, Georgia, Russia, and Ukraine predominantly is where the Khazar Empire was. And Herzl and many of the early Zionists came from that region. They're Austrian, Russian, coming from that region, where we know that there was later on, many years after any of these biblical stories, there was a lot of conversion to Judaism. Many people assert that Herzl and many of the Ashkenazi Jews that come from these Eastern European areas are actually descendants of converts. Yes, they've been Jewish for many, many, many years. I don't dispute their Jewishness because I believe being Jewish is a religion. You can believe whatever it is you believe.
And again, there is the crux of the matter. Okay? She has just let the cat out of the bag, at least for her audience. Okay? Which it definitely, from these comments, it seems like a lot of her audience already knows this. Right? There's 6,000 comments. Right? And 145 views in 3 days. Now, one thing this woman says is that you can convert to a religion. Well, you definitely could convert to a religion, but again, the Bible is not a religion. The Bible simply is a book about a heritage of a particular people. Those people being the children of God, who you would refer to as the Israelites. Okay?
But their Jewishness does not stem from an ethnic tie to that region. It stems from a religious tie to a religion.
So there you go. So they have no ethnic tie to the biblical Israelites. This is why it is illegal to get a DNA test in the land of Israel, because they do not want to reveal this truth. Which in the 90s you had some Ashkenazi Jews, right, or should I say Amalekites, that were outside of the land of Israel. I think they were like Harvard, or there were some university, Amalekites, and they ended up gathering DNA records from around the world that were available to purchase, of these Jewish people, and they found that over 90% of them did not have any DNA evidence that tied to the people around the Levant. Not necessarily saying that that they belong in the land of Israel, but that they didn't match the DNA records of the people in the Middle East, the Levant, right, West Asia, and that is because those people are vastly different, right? These Amalekites and the Edomites are vastly different than the other people in that land. And why is that? Well, that's because they descend from Esau, and Esau predominantly went up into Europe after he came out of the Caucasus Mountains, when he was stuck there for 1,000 years, right? And he came out around the 1200 or 1400s, which is when the Renaissance started. Okay, it's because they came back into power.
A family ancestors who converted at some point. Let's keep hearing what he has to say.
The term Palestine was coined by the Romans in order to dissociate the place that was called Judea until now.
Palestine was not coined by the Romans. It was coined by the Greeks. Tells you the first written records referring to Palestine emerged in the 12th century, right, BC. It says the dynasty of Egypt, which used the term Peleset for the neighboring people of the land. In the 8th century, the Assyrians referred to the region as Palestu or Philistu, which ultimately these people were referring to that land as the land of the Philistines, okay? But it says in the Hellenistic period, right, the Greeks, these names were carried over into Greek, appearing in the histories of Herodotus, right? This is really the first, what you would call a modern history book, by the way, the Herodotus, the histories, right? When you go into college, you find out, you read this, and he was basically an Edomite who was recording the events taking place from a non-biased perspective instead of tying it through story or through song or poem, right? That was considered revolutionary back in his time. It says in the 5th century, as Palestine, the Roman Empire conquered the region in 6 AD, established a province known as Judea. Then in 132 AD, in the period of Bar Kokhba revolt, the province was expanded and renamed Syria Palestina. And during the Byzantine period, the region was split into the province of Palestinia Prima and Palestinia Secunda and Palestinia Tartia. following the Muslim conquest of the Levant in the 630s. So again, remember I was telling you how the Arabs took over the land after like the Byzantine and the Holy Roman Empire kind of started flourishing? That's what this is talking about.
It had no connection to Arabs for the simple reason that Arabs arrived to the land of Palestine only 600 years later during the Arab conquering. So there were no Arabs in the land of Israel.
Okay, so if the Romans were saying, okay, we're going to call this Palestine because we want to de-Judaize the area, then a lot of the people who were Jews in that area would now be, over many generations, would identify as just part of Palestine, Palestinian. That's what they would think. It's just like, I live in California, I don't identify it as Mexico. There were many generations long ago that did, because it was, but now it's not, so now it's California. I think I'm an American. Right, identities change, but it doesn't mean, you know, when you look at, for example, a better example, I'm not a good example of that, but when you look at the Mexican Americans living in Texas, for example, the Mexican Americans I know in Texas have been there. They've never left. That they were there. They've been there the whole time. And then it one time was Mexico, and then the next day it was America. And they were like, okay, I guess now we're Americans. They identify as Americans. They don't identify as Mexicans nationally. They believe they're living in Texas. They believe it's America. That's how they identify. That doesn't erase the fact that they're the indigenous people of that land. Just because they change the moniker, they change the flag, they change how they identify themselves.
But yes, throughout those 1,400 years, very slowly Arabs came, primarily, mostly when Jews returned in the 19th century.
First of all, that's not true. He's saying that Jews suddenly went back with Herzl, and the Jews were there, and then the Arabs came along, and the Arabs started showing up when the Jews were there. We know that is absolutely not a fact, that the Jews began arriving, and there were people there in Palestine. There were people that were living there. They were Arabic-speaking people in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and right before World War II and after World War II, and that they made up the majority of the population.
And this is true because when after World War because remember, after the Ottoman Empire basically conquered the land of Jerusalem from the Crusaders, they stayed in that land from 1299, and they eventually lost it in World War II when it was lost, and it was ultimately awarded to the English. And this is why the Balfour Declaration was ultimately the English that had made the declaration that the land was to be used to reseat the Jewish people into that land, because after World War I took place, the land of Jerusalem, basically Turkey lost, or should I say the Ottoman Empire lost. And when Ottoman Empire lost, all the Levant area for the most part was taken as spoiled by the Allied powers, right? English and whatnot. And what happened is the Ottoman Empire basically relegated itself to the land of Turkey, right? Which is why the Turkish people are in that land today. Now, the English, since World War I, had control of Jerusalem. It was their fiefdom, and they simply just left the people in there that were already there. And who were the people that were there? Like she said, right? They were Arabs, right? Now, some of those Arabs can trace their lineage back to the Israelites that had mingled amongst those people that managed to stay in that land. But by and large, it was a very small number compared to the rest of the Palestinians that descend back to Ishmael. Now, what happened is when the Balfour Declaration was signed in 1917, the Jewish people were permitted to go into that land and settle it, right? There was designated areas in the land of Israel which these Israeli could settle within. Now, that was not such a busy time for these Amalekites, because not that many Israelis moved into the land of Israel. A lot of them simply stayed in wherever they were at, New York, Poland, and whatnot, right? But it wasn't until after World War II that you had a big impetus to move the Jewish people into the land of Israel. In fact, even the Germans were going to pay to relocate all the Jewish people in the German homeland to the land of Israel. Okay, but history is what it is, and that information never really got out, and we know what happened because of history. Okay, these devils set up a big marketing campaign. They pushed the Holocaust down everybody's throat, and they then won the sympathy of the world, at least through the media, and they started to move in mass into the land of Israel.
The Jews, and then Arabs came in. It was the other way around.
The world decided, I'm cutting long story short, to bring a solution, a tough solution to both sides, to divide the land between a Jewish state and an Arab state. It wasn't called Palestinian. Jews said yes, Arabs said no. This was the Peel Commission. Fast forward 1947, the UN came up with the same sort of idea, divide into a Jewish state and Arab state. Jews said yes, Arabs said no, attacked the Jews and wanted to kill all the Jews. The Jews fought back, won. During that war...
So that's the issue when they conflate.
And that's another thing real quick. I'm going to cut both of them off. This here shows that these are not the people, okay? The Bible tells you very clearly that when the true Israelites return back into the land, that there will be no more war. Right? And that can be found here in Micah 4:3. And really, this is also just a repeat of almost the same scripture that Isaiah wrote, right? And it says, and actually, I'm going to start up at 1. This is Micah 4:1. But in the last days it shall come to pass that the mountain of the house of Yahawah, Ba'ashem Yahawashi, shall be established in the top of the mountains. Now, when it says mountains, it ultimately is talking about the government, okay? So the government of the Lord is going to be established over the mountains or the other governments of the world, meaning that the Lord is going to take over. And it shall be exalted above the hills, again, smaller governments, and people shall flow onto it, and many nations shall come and say, come and let us go up to the mountain of Yahawah, Ba'ashem Yahawashi, and to the house of the God of Jacob, and he will teach us of his ways, and we will walk in his paths. For the law shall go forth of Zion. Remember, Zion is like the perfected version of us Israelites, right? Once we're in our rightful state, and the 2/3 are gone and been reborn, right? And they're now good. That's Zion, okay? The monument of the Lord. And the word of Yahawah Ba'ashem Yahawashi from Jerusalem, and he shall judge amongst many people and rebuke strong nations afar off, and they shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up a sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. So there you go, right? This right here proves that these are not the biblical Israelites. These are the devils, okay? Because again, once the Israelites return back into the land, that means peace for the inhabitants upon the face of the earth. After captivity, and after the world has been established anew, there's going to be no more war.
They're saying the Jews, when really this was the Zionists, right? These are Zionist settlers that were there. They happen to have a religion of being Jewish. That's not why they were attacked. They were attacked. There was war, there was contention, because they had made it clear they wanted to take much of the land for themselves to create a Jewish nation that would not include all of these Arab people who were already living in that region and in that land, and who were desperately seeking, after many years of being under various different empires, they wanted to have their own autonomy. And so it wasn't this, we're just going after the Jews, but there is this conflation that's happening, and you're hearing it right here. He's conflating it on purpose so that people feel then sympathy for the Jewish people, say, oh no, Jewish people are under attack once again. These were Zionists who were under attack.
Or 600,000 Arabs that have been living in smaller Israel, fled, and some of them were also expelled, because that's what happens when you try and kill your enemy and you lose. That's what happened throughout history. We founded the state of Israel, and that's where we are now. So the state of Israel is the third time we have a Jewish state on our indigenous land. We have 2 million.
It's not their indigenous lands. These devils belong in the land of Petra, which is south of south of Israel for the most part. Okay, you know it today as Petra or Jordan. That's where these devils. That's their indigenous land.
And Arabs living in the state of Israel, full Israeli citizens. They vote. They serve on court. They pay taxes. They're one of all and enjoy full equal rights.
No, they don't.
That's
so I'll tell you, the Arab population in Israel, those who have Israeli citizenship, he's right, they do have the same rights, the same basic rights, the same, they're supposed to be treated in the same way by the courts, by the police, rights that people in the West Bank do not have, rights that Gazans do not have. They do have those same basic human rights. They don't have the same rights in that they cannot marry whoever they want. An Arab Israeli who meets, there's 2 million of them, but they go outside to maybe the West Bank, they meet a nice girl, they cannot bring her back in to live in Israel. The process is extremely difficult to try to get permission for that. The Israeli government is not looking to import Arabs into Israel, so they highly discourage this and they don't give out permits very often. That means that Arab is forced to then move to the West Bank, which is what Israel wants. However, a Jewish Israeli is allowed to go and find some random woman 6,000 miles away who has absolutely no connection to the land whatsoever and say, well, I married her, she's Jewish, so she's coming here to live with us, and she's granted that ability automatically. So they're not given the same exact rights. They're not able to immigrate in their family members, immigrate in their loved ones, and if they leave, it's the process of coming back. Actually, I'm not 100% certain if an Arab Israeli leaves. I know that if a Jerusalemite who doesn't carry actual Israeli citizenship, I know that if they leave Jerusalem, they lose their Jerusalemite status and then they can't really come back. I'm not 100% certain about an Arab Israeli if they lose their Israeli citizenship if they move away. However, they certainly don't have the same rights when it comes to marriage, family, and immigration. That is strictly for Jewish people, so that Israel can keep its Jewish character and limit the number of others, the number of non-Jews living there. So that's Naftali Bennett. That's his 3-minute, the breakdown of why we belong here and they don't. He is the former prime minister of Israel. He's likely to maybe be another prime minister in the future if Netanyahu is ousted. Naftali Bennett might get that slot again, who knows? But you see, he's still just as extreme as the rest. They're all super extreme. I just wanted to kind of give that breakdown because it was really, that is the thinking, and yet from the very beginning when they say, well, the Jews first arrived back 3,000 years ago, so now it's just a matter of, well, then whose land is it? I guess it's based on, who can prove their existence further back. Many of the people living in Palestine today can, in fact, prove their existence all the way back to the Canaanites, in which case...
That's incorrect, because again, the Palestinians today, like I was saying, the reason why they're called Palestinians is because the Greeks try to refer to them as the Philistines, right? But those aren't the same people, right? The Palestinians, by and large, are the descendants of the Ishmaelites, which came way later and do not belong in that land, okay? That land is not the land of Ishmael. The land of Ishmael is down there in Saudi Arabia, okay? In the Arab Peninsula. That was the land that was given to them, okay?
They're the indigenous people. They were there first. They're not, they were there before Abraham.
See, this is where this lady and the majority of the world gets this wrong, because again, they do not care enough about this truth to study it and get it correct, okay? So this lady here is basically saying that the Palestinians are the people that were in the land before Joshua went in there and cleansed the land of the Philistines, right? And all those other people, right? Or the people, the Canaanites, basically, right? That's who this lady is trying to say these Palestinians are, but they're not.
Abraham and his ilk showed up. So I guess we're just going to play that game. Who got here first? rather than actually just assessing the reality of the situation, which is you're committing an ethnic cleansing campaign to get these people off the land. You don't want them there, and this is the reason why, because you think the land is yours.
So there you have it, Akim. So that was my reaction video to this lesson, and the reason why I wanted to make this is because, again, this is proof showing that the Lord is now revealing these devils to the mainstream media, okay, to the mainstream audience. You know, these people are being found out. Esau is being made bare, and people are starting to realize it, right? You're going to start seeing when people start, because right now in these comments, when you go down through these comments, everybody's basically telling these people or saying that these aren't the biblical Israelites, okay, which is great, right? They know that these are not the biblical Israelites. But here, look, the Igbos, Hebrews, and Yoruba, Judah, these were the people living in the area called Israel and Palestine today. You know this by customs and traditions based upon daily living. You see, and that's beautiful because, again, the Igbos and the Yoruba tribe, those are basically all West African Israelites that managed to stay in the land of Africa and weren't taken on the slave ships here to America. Okay, they were left there for a reason. Now, that being said, right now it is very evident that people know that these are not the biblical Israelites. But once the majority of the people start realizing that not only are they not the Israelites, but that they're the biblical Edomites, that's when these devils are going to go crazy and they're going to start to shut shit down. They're going to really bring out their hate speech laws and all this type of stuff. But until then, Akim, we have to just endure. We have to continue to preach this gospel, make these lessons and educate the people and show them what the truth is, to let them know that the Negro, Latino, Native Americans, and anybody whose father's lineage goes back to that bloodline are the true biblical Israelites, and that these Israelis, they are not the Israelites, right? They do not fulfill the prophecies of the Israelites, but they fulfill the prophecies of the Edomites, right? And even their own records, and their own people have come out and admitted that they are the Edomites. Okay, this is Revelations 3 and 9. Behold, I will make them of the synagogue of Satan, which say they are Jews and are not, but do lie. Behold, I will make them to come and worship before thy feet, and to know that I have loved thee. So, with all that, hopefully this video is edifying, Akim. I know it was a little long, but until next time, let's go ahead and give all honor and glory and praises to Yahawah, B'Shem Yahawashi, B'Shem Qadash. Shalom.